the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Authentic Audio Productions, providing a personalized, full-service audio solution for you or your company, no matter how big or small. From show hosting to content creation, with the use of professional recording tools and plenty of experience, Authentic Audio is your one-stop shop for everything your podcast needs to start, to get going, to get big, and to stay that way. Elevate your podcast and bring it to the next level today by visiting AuthenticAudioPro.com. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Monday, September 16th. Week 2 is darn near in the books for the NFL. The Major League Baseball postseason picture is coming into more focus. The NHL and the NBA are just around the corner here. So we're in that neck of the woods sports-wise where things really start to cross-pollinate, and that's pretty fun for us because the numbers can kind of all come into focus on our side as well. Speaking of which, plenty of extensions that hit the NFL books just before the start of the season are officially in SpotTrack.com. Full breakdowns, full extensions, some pieces corresponding to some of the bigger ones like Dak and a few others, but seems like we're at a standstill now, right? It seems like the Ja'Marr Chase saga is going to be on hold until 2025. And as I noted on Twitter, it's probably an okay thing for him. I understand the Bengals wanting to jump the gun and get this thing done, but waiting provides a little bit more pressure. For those of you who didn't really understand what I was saying tweet-wise, he'll have 1 year left, the 5th year option. It's fully guaranteed. It's $22 million. It's a good payday. He's probably okay with it, right? It's not a minimum salary, that's for sure. It's not the Brock Purdy situation. But it's that and then a tag. And yes, T. Higgins just went down that path. But I think with all due respect, Ja'Marr Chase is being treated as a different animal right now. All right. T. Higgins is a 1B, probably a 2 in many franchises' eyes. We'll see when it gets to free agency next year, just how well he's valued. You know, Calvin Ridley had eyes on true number one money and just didn't get it. All right. He's a $50 million guarantee. So I think Higgins will be markedly better than that, but we'll see if he gets a free agent contract that resembles whatever he was looking for from Cincinnati, whether it was 25, 27 a year. We'll see. Chase is just not on this level. Now, mathematically, is he on Justin Jefferson's level? No. Is he even on CeeDee Lamb's level? No. But he's in that conversation, and that's really all it takes with this position right now to logically place him near or at the top of this market, which is currently $35 a year, $110 guaranteed, about $90 guaranteed at signing. This is not an organization outside of the Joe Burrow contract that throws numbers like that around. And I can guarantee you that the guarantee at signing is one of the big points of contention because that's cash out of the owner's pocket right now into an escrow account. That's difficult for a franchise that tries to live below the fold a little bit and always has. So there's probably plenty of numbers that are competing right now. And I would venture to gather that for the most part, the two sides remain far apart. And that's why Chase and his agent basically said, we're cutting this thing off today. We're not going to talk about this week after week. We'll see you in March. Oh, by the way, when the salary cap is probably 270. So even just putting him in Justin Jefferson's conversation now makes it a $37 million contract. Is he worth that? I've said it. I'll continue to say it. The math says no. And through 2 weeks, he doesn't look like the alpha player that can separate and become a put the team on my shoulders type offensive weapon. But there's a lot of things wrong with Cincinnati right now. Let's put it that way. Are we going to start hearing the trade talks? Yes. Okay. Yes, because there is a situation that is somewhat broken. Yes, because every team in the league knows Cincinnati's going to lowball this thing and probably right up until the finish line. And that may be a tag. And if it's a tag, I don't expect Ja'Marr Chase to be active in 2026 for any capacity. So there's that coming. That's what the next 2.5 years could look like for Ja'Marr Chase if Cincinnati doesn't break their trends and their traditions and strike this thing to at least a comparable contract to the Lamb, to the Chase, to some degree to what A.J. Brown has gotten in Philadelphia a couple times now. So I understand the standstill. I understand the waiting game from his perspective. This is dangerous waters for Cincinnati, because if they think that they handle everything fine with T. Higgins, they got lucky on this one, because Chase was a clear number one ahead of him, right? And it's similar to Ayuk in San Francisco. Here's our deal. We have plenty of other weapons. We have offers to trade you. At the end of the day, you can take this deal, or you can continue to hold out and lose money and kind of, taint your public image as you approach free agency for the first time and try to cash in with 31 other franchises. It's not hard for good teams to be able to put that kind of leverage down. And with T. Higgins being suppressed by Chase and his need for a contract, kind of made everybody look around in the room and say, all right, let's just forget this. It's not worth our time to skip football. It's not worth our time to not take this $22 million franchise tag. Hopefully there's a wink, handshake conversation behind the scenes that the second tag isn't coming. But if it is, that's 120% more than $22 million. So while he doesn't have a multi-year guarantee ahead of him, if that's the worst case scenario, a second franchise tag, he's a $50 million player. Okay. All things included, there are plenty of worse ways to walk through life. Let's put it that way, than a $50 million payout for 2 years of football. He probably walks into free agency, and that probably leads to the correct contract structure for Ja'Marr Chase, which, if you've listened to this podcast, is sort of what I thought Cincinnati always wanted to do. So lowballing Ja'Marr Chase in 2024 seems like a bad move for them. And from a long-term cap perspective, right, not being able to push this thing out starting this year, it might be. But I'm telling you, this is exactly what they wanted. If they could get this guy to take a deal that works for them now, they'll do it. If not, yeah, it may have to look a little heftier and more compressed next year, because they're extending off of a fifth-year option instead of a fourth year plus a fifth-year option. But they wanted the accounting side of this, the staggered approach, to work in their favor. And that means T. Higgins comes off the books at basically the exact same price that Ja'Marr Chase, his fifth-year option, costs next year. That's not an accident. That's how stuff works now. They can keep that, negotiate, work out something that's, markedly closer to what the Jefferson and Lamb deals look like, but probably not maxed out top of the market, even for where the cap is going, 270-ish next year. So I think the Bengals wanted this all along. Take our kind of crappy deal, or leave it until next March when we're ready to actually do some serious talking about this. And from Chase's perspective, as we've seen with this position over three straight off seasons, it appears that the sky is the limit. Okay. If you are ready and willing to be a number one receiver for your current team or for another team, there's 30 million, 80 million guaranteed sitting there for you. That's just kind of how it works. So I would expect it all to come down and work out properly next March or April. I think the exact timeline that Cincinnati wanted, but it didn't surprise me at all that things have broken off and have been pushed out until next year, because, like I said, A, I think the Bengals wanted that all along, and B, it's beneficial to Chase. It's sort of a win-win here, as long as the actual contract comes to fruition, right? If not, this gets messy as hell. And like I said, expect the absolute worst if you're a Bengals fan. This guy will stay away. He will stay away. It won't be sideline baseball cap. It'll be flat out stay away to the Brandon Ayuk level. But I think this is a considerably better player. Okay, back to some of the actual contracts on the books and how they're being produced and how they're being played out and where we're headed. One name I didn't get to last week because I didn't want to overreact on too many things, even though that's sort of what we do, and that's part of the gig, I think, is Daniel Jones, who has now had 2 straight flat weeks. And this is kind of just the player that he is. And now we can compound this on the fact that he's recovering or having to live with this post-injury part of his career, which, for a 27-year-old shouldn't be that big of a deal. But I think the game itself was already in his head after a bunch of bad seasons. He didn't do really that much to garner this contract outside of being the only guy available, the only option available. The Giants 100% tried to replace him in this past April's draft by moving up a couple of slots. And by the way, they still could have with Michael Penix Jr., who went just a few picks after Malik Neighbors went to the Giants. They didn't take a quarterback in this draft. Okay. And if I'm looking at the roster right now, they don't have that Tyrod Taylor behind him. They did get Drew Lock out of Seattle and actually gave him a fairly decent contract. So it's a $5 million guarantee. That's what he's doing sitting with a clipboard right now. And then quite a few playing incentives. Okay. If he takes 40, 50, 60% of the snaps this year, so that starts in about week 5, he'll get about $1 million to finish the season extra. If he's a 90 plus passer rating, if he completes 65%, things like that, pretty standard numbers for even a slightly above average starting quarterback. In other words, if he turns out to be Geno Smith, the player he just left backing up, he's going to make upwards of $7-8 million this year to finish the season as the Giants starter. And why am I framing it as a Drew Lock conversation? Because I just think this is where we're headed. All right, I told you, November of last year, really after the injury happened to Daniel Jones, that yes, this was a 2-year contract, so that 2024 was going to be the final full guarantee. And there was really no way out of this. There was no trading away Daniel Jones on an injury with this much, $36 million cash sitting on this sucker. But now it's even less about what's this year, because this year's already here and guaranteed. But there is a $23 million injury guarantee on 2025. And I tread lightly with this because it's really hard for an NFL player in today's world with the science and the technology to suffer an injury that takes away a player's ability to pass a physical next March 12th. But it's certainly possible. Okay, it's certainly possible. We've seen some nasty ones in the past. Quarterbacks are being protected more than ever. I wouldn't say that's the case for the Giants right now, but the concern is out there, and it's starting to make the rounds already on the socials that this guarantee exists, because this would be threat level midnight for this Giants organization, even if it's a new organization, right? If the GM and the coaching staff and all that have to fall by the sword along with Daniel Jones this offseason, the last thing a new front office wants to have to deal with is a $23 million guarantee on a quarterback they do not want. And that's certainly possible. So just something to think about. And by the way, more reason for Drew Lock to become a starting quarterback for this franchise sooner than later, right? Protect yourself. Understand that the $36 million you owe Daniel Jones this year is already on fire. It's gone. All right, it's gone. Cut your losses and make sure that $23 million stays intact for 2025. And give Drew Lock a legitimate chance to maybe Sam Darnold himself this year, a name I'm going to get to in a few seconds. But it wasn't an accident signing Drew Lock. That was the start to, we need to do everything possible to figure out what our plan C is at this position, right? Free agency, then the draft, and now it's Daniel Jones. But we'll see for how long. The contract says that at some point in time soon, if the wheels keep falling off for this Giants season, that Daniel Jones should not be playing football on the field for contractual purposes. How about some players that continue to play themselves into much better situations than I think any of us ever anticipated? Let's start with Geno Smith. 2-0 Seattle Seahawks. That's not super much of a surprise. This team has had success and continues to have success, even when kind of in the trenches, on those ugly games. But Geno's been good. Not great, good. And for a guy that wasn't good for a very, very long time, like like 8 straight seasons, to now have what looks like 4 consecutive seasons of good to above average. All right. He was 30-11 touchdown to interceptions in 2022. He was 20-9 last year. And he's on that same path in 2024, at least to start. I know it's early, small sample size, but he's doing the things that he has done now for the better part of 2.5 seasons. And I think the shock part of it needs to be over. And with that comes a reality check. All right. Because this is a guy, March of 2023, after that first kind of shocker season, that got a 3 for 75. And for all intents, it was a 1 for 27.5. It was less than what it would have cost to franchise tag him that year. Okay. And he accepted it, knowing that he was going to play himself into multiple years of this contract. And he has. All right. So $27.5 million in 2023. He gets $22.5 this year. There's tons of incentives on this thing. Okay. Like $10 million worth of incentives that can become $15 million of incentives if he just has a max season. 4,300 yards, 31 touchdowns, 70% completion, the works. I don't think we expect that. That's not the player he's going to be, a max guy. But there's a world now where enough is enough. Okay. And 25 a year over a 2-year span is just not going to cut it when players like Dak Prescott are now in the 60s. So we'll see. There's 1 for 25 left through 2025. There is a nice early roster bonus built into that. So by March 16th, we'll kind of know our answer. Will the Seahawks force Geno to play out this contract, kind of take it or leave it? Or by March 16th next year, will the two sides have come to an agreement on an extension that kind of uses that roster bonus as a starting point, and they go from there? All signs lead to that right now, that the almost 34-year-old is about to get his second multi-year extension. And it probably looks a lot nicer than this past one because of the consistency. Is he worth a lot more than $25 million a year? Well, sure, because the going rate for slightly above average at his age is still well over 30. I mean, Kirk Cousins is on this list, and yes, he had to go to free agency to do it, but he's a $45 million player at now over 36 years old, coming off of an injury. And yes, Cousins has more production, and he's got some advanced ratings in the 80s that Geno Smith may never have, and he's got some season-long passer ratings well above 100 that Geno Smith might never have again. But for the most part, from a winning perspective, if that is worth a damn to you, they're not that far apart. But right now, they're $20 million a year apart. So just that example alone is enough to tell us that where Geno's headed over the next 12 months, financially speaking, could be significant. All right. If we look at Baker, another player on this list, and maybe a player even more worthy of this conversation, because not only is his Tampa Bay Bucks 2-0, but from a productivity standpoint, he's one of the more, I don't know, successful players through 2 weeks, quarterback wise. All right. He's lighting it up. He looks like the gunslinger that the Browns were hoping he would be forever ago. And for whatever reason, with this set of weapons, especially now with a healthy Chris Godwin, it is working out exactly as anticipated. There were a lot of people who thought it was crazy that Tampa Bay paid as much as they did to bring everybody back. And so far, so good. That's all we can say about that. Now, this is year one of that 3 for 100 for Baker. But again, $33 million a year. And the way it was structured was, okay, it's a $30 million payout this year, but we're going to future guarantee 10 mil. So if this is a one and done, if we decide that, this marriage shouldn't continue any longer, it's going to be a 1 for 40. Not the worst thing in the world for Baker, all right, who has really never had this payday. But 40 isn't 25, okay? And the gap between Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith isn't that big. I would certainly agree with the analysts that I've heard that say that Baker is playing at a higher level right now. But they're both winning about the same. They've got about the same weapon set. If you look around the room, right, it's not a product of the quarterback putting the team on his shoulders. Not necessarily. It is a product of really good roster construction and I think really good coaching on both sides. These two players have a real chance here to go from, I think in both cases, ground zero in their careers to what could be considered a second or third tier quarterback contract. That's bonkersville. Okay. Now Baker at 33 and change, it's about 30 per year for the next two. So he'll make 30 this year, 30 next year, and then 40 in 2026. But here's the difference with Baker Mayfield. He's only 29 and a half. Okay. There's a real distance for him to go here before he needs to really think about hanging him up. And financially speaking, this benefits him. Now, do you want to get into something before age 30? Probably. But that would mean Tampa Bay rips up the final 2 years of this contract, right? It's a 1-year deal, and then we got to redo it. And that's probably not likely. Okay. Again, the cash flow is 30, 30, 40. I think for all intents here, he's going to have to bite down and swallow this 2 for 60, which again, in the grand scheme of things, is remarkable money for him. But in the grand scheme of quarterback things, is mid-range, literally mid-range. Dak at 60, Baker's making 30. He belongs much, much closer to the lower second tier from a financial standpoint, which is, 45, 48, probably Jared Goff land. But it's probably going to take till 2026 to get there. He's going to have to probably play out all of this year, all of next year. Hopefully some of his $5 million of incentives hit to sweeten the pot a little bit. And then before he gets to that 1 for 40 in 2026, none of which is guaranteed, that's when things get serious. And, Mike Evans will be off the books or possibly extended again. Chris Godwin probably not in the focus anymore. So it may be a completely brand new set of weapons, a much different defense, because a lot of that's going to age out as well. It's a really nice time for Baker to be developing into an experienced professional quarterback, all while making $60 million. But man, after that, if he's still this player, it's not going to be mid-range anymore. Let's just put it that way. So probably another full off season to go on Baker. I don't see that being the case at all with Geno Smith. As long as these players stay on this current track, again, above average, not elite, second to third tier financial quarterbacks. Who else? How about Derek Carr? Talk about an overreaction. We have to at this point. I mean, he is lighting up the league. He just lit up a Cowboys defense that looked outstanding in week 1. And couldn't stop the Saints offense and 45-year-old Alvin Kamara and whoever else you wanted to throw out there for one drive. Not for one drive. It was an absolute thumping, and it's their second straight thumping if you're the Saints. The first one was Carolina. The second one was Dallas. Couldn't be more polar opposites in terms of the expectations of this season. But, man, I was banging the drum here against the Saints front office when they converted about $30 million of Derek Carr's salary back in February. And look, it was par for the course. This is what the Saints do with every contract because they start at negative 70 and they have to get to 0 at some point. But it just set themselves up for, veritable dead cap hell, which again, par for their course, with a player that I was pretty positive they were looking to get away from after 2024. There's a $10 million guarantee next year, just like Baker Mayfield has for Derek Carr. So there was going to be a buyout. It was going to load up to about $51 million of dead cap, which, man, the last 6 months have really changed things because Russell Wilson's $85 million of dead cap kind of reset the standard for how we look at what's good and bad and doable and tenable with some of these court contracts, especially at this position where teams just aren't going to wait around anymore. But About $51 million of dead cap for Derek Carr. 10 of that is cash. Well, right now, Derek Carr isn't a bubble candidate. He's a value candidate. Okay. So just like Baker, it was 30 in 2020, 30 in the first year, 30 in the second year, and 40 in the third year. He's in that second year, making 30 million right now. And he's got 10 million guaranteed on 40 next season before 50 million available in 2026 when he'll be 35 years old. Again, he's not the oldest quarterback playing right now in the league. All right. 33 and a half, going on 34. I think there's a very good chance that if he looks like this for 75% of this season, that they're going to stick it out for sure. They have been drafting. They have been developing. At some point, they're going to turn the keys over to a younger player. But as of now, Derek Carr's contract looks safe. His bump up to 40 million cash next year is probably just fine for him. He has a full no trade clause. I expect them to convert much of that $30 million salary and his $10 million roster bonus next year, probably next February for cap purposes, because Saints are going to Saint. And then they'll take a huge hit probably to move on after that. So interesting season right now. They're certainly contending for the division, Baker versus Carr kind of situation. Seems like both players will be stuck in their current contracts, better for worse, through 2025. And then both will have charcoal lines underneath that, which says, extend me, cut me, trade me. But the final year of the contract, for the most part, for both of these players after 2025, very much in question. Couple more. Sam Darnold, I mentioned him before. We kind of jokingly said when J.J. McCarthy went down that this was going to be Sam Darnold's, fourth chance to showcase himself as a starting quarterback in this league. And the problem with the other ones, I guess this is technically third. The problem with the other ones is it was the Jets in a disastrous, and this is an oxymoron, but in a disastrous window of Jets football from a front office and a head coach. Then it was Carolina in a disastrous, again, oxymoron, window of Carolina Panthers football, although maybe not as bad as the current one. Then he went and backed up in San Francisco. And, he got some preseason time, and I think he got a couple garbage snaps behind Purdy. Actually, he took 70 snaps last year. I'm looking at it right now. And there was always this window of Sam Darnold's career where you saw the flashes, And we talked about this with Zach Wilson a little bit, and there was maybe one or two Zach Wilson flashes. Well, there were a few dozen Sam Darnold flashes. You just knew that the capability of starting a football game was in him, and he just needed, to raise himself mentally one more level. And there's a lot of smart people that did a lot of talking about Sam Darnold this offseason that thought one season in that Kyle Shanahan offense might have been enough, right? Just nerding out, geeking out, understanding the X's and O's, seeing the adjustments, seeing the changes, seeing the preparation inside that offense, which is, sky's the limit offense, could have taken him mentally to that next level. And I think at least through 2 weeks, and with a limited set of options, okay, it's basically just an aging Aaron Jones and Justin Jefferson, who's now a little compromised health-wise, but, no Jordan Addison, no TJ Hawkinson, and a younger group of players that have yet to develop into this offense. He's been outstanding. He's been great. He's in this conversation with the Bakers, with the Geno Smiths. And he's on a 1 for 10. And he's on a 1 for 10 because it was going to be, you're probably going to start 4 games for us. Okay, that's the mindset. 4 to 6 weeks, come out here. Let's slow play this McCarthy situation. And then, oh, by the way, he's not going to make it. It's your year. So he'll make his full 10 mil, injury withstanding, because he's got some significant roster per game roster bonuses. It's his year, and he's off to a hell of a start. The problem is this, and I realize this is the biggest overreaction ever, But I'm looking around the room. All right. And let's just say that Sam Darnold does hit free agency next year. Well, I'm struggling. I'm struggling to find an organization that's going to need to take a chance on a player that could be the next Baker, the next Geno. It just doesn't happen. All right. Ryan Tannehill was sort of the poster child for this, leaving Miami, going to Tennessee, and at least making them a formidable playoff contender. They were never more than that, but they were that. And I think if you're a team that isn't that right now, Sam Darnold is on a track and should be available to at least give you an opportunity to do that. But who's it going to be? You know, I don't think a reunion in Carolina makes sense, though that might be the only option, because it sure looks like at some point soon, Bryce Young is going to be outright benched and Andy Dalton will get another crack at the starting offense there. But Arizona looks great with Kyler right now. Atlanta has 2 starting quarterbacks. Baltimore's not going anywhere with Lamar. Josh Allen with Buffalo. Caleb just came to Chicago. Burrow's holding down the fort, at least in Cincinnati. You know, Watson's guaranteed 2 more years, and they've already added backups behind him that they think could step in. I guess that's a quiet landing spot for him. Dallas is a no. Bo Nix will at least get next year. Jared Goff, no. Jordan Love, no. CJ Stroud, no. No, Richardson may be flexible here if he can't get his act together quick enough. Lawrence should be on the bubble, but he's fully guaranteed for 5 more seasons. Mahomes, no. Herbert, no. Stafford's a conversation we can have, because who knows when the wheels will totally fall off there. Seems like Gardner Minshew, who's got some guaranteed money in 2025, is going to hold down that fort for the foreseeable future. The Dolphins are a conversation we could have, and we'll get to that in a second to finish this podcast, but they're certainly on the short list. Is Minnesota on the short list? What if Sam Darnold, especially when this offense gets healthy, what if Sam Darnold takes this team into the first or second round of the postseason when they were projected to win 4 games, even with J.J. McCarthy as the quarterback? Okay. Look, we've seen other teams punt on their highly drafted quarterback before, and we've seen it happen in that division quite a few times. The Minnesota Vikings are very much in this conversation. They're on the short list. Patriots, I don't think so. Giants, yeah. Yeah. Saints, again, we just talked, Derek Carr is pretty secure right now through 2025. Jets, I don't think Sam Darnold would return there, unfortunately. But if Aaron Rodgers retires, sure, short list. Philadelphia, no. Pittsburgh, yeah. Heck yeah. Is there a world where Sam Darnold in a Pittsburgh offense is a better fit than Justin Fields or Russell Wilson? Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Seattle, no, I think it's Geno's. San Francisco, I believe, will keep Purdy long term. Baker should be locked in for next year in Tampa. Will Levis, okay, here we go. That's a real one. Okay, that might be the top of the list right now, because Tennessee has been adding pieces, paying pieces, retaining pieces, signing big free agents. And their quarterback right now is letting them down. That's the one to monitor. Giants, Tennessee, and just how far this Minnesota situation can play out. Because they certainly don't have to play J.J. McCarthy, let's put it that way. If Sam Darnold continues to command this job and command this offense in a way that looks great, again, with compromised weapons. So I'm rooting for the guy, because I think he's had 2 bad situations really stifle his career. And I just love these redemption stories. It's the only thing I wanted to talk about this morning was this Geno stuff, this Baker stuff, and now where Sam Darnold could be going. And yes, we're overreacting to 2 weeks, but at least we're doing it with a positivity, right? This is positive stuff. We have mid-range quarterbacks from a financial aspect who are playing themselves into what I believe could be 15 to 20 million more per year in Geno Smith's case. So timelines are interesting. The construction of their rosters are interesting, but for these four guys, Carr, Darnold, Smith, and Mayfield, there's a lot riding on what they're doing right now, because any kind of consistency is going to get them back. It's just how it goes. So while the teams that really need to make a change or could need to make a change after 2024, it's not a big list, and many of those teams will want to go back to the draft. I think there's an opportunity here. There's a real opportunity if teams need to make a change. So the most important position, and we like to look at it from all angles. This one may be my most fun, though. The mid-range, the mid-tier, that elusive mid-range paid quarterback that maybe won't stay there for long. All right. Quick stuff on Tua and we'll get out of here. I absolutely hate having to post financial information about players that have gone through injuries or off-field incidents or arrests and things like that. Suspensions, suspension-oriented stuff, but it is just a nature of what I do. There's a direct impact on what happens to a player either on the field or off the field versus how his contract is impacted, and then, subsequently how the team's financials are impacted. So I didn't post any information on Tua as a way for me to objectively say, these are the scenarios that I think should play out. It is simply, I know you're all going to be talking about all these scenarios for the next week, maybe 2 weeks. I just want to make sure that the understanding is out there, that the logic is out there, that the numbers are out there, so that I'm not answering these things all the time, because I don't want to be. I don't want to be talking about Tua and where things could be headed, because I don't have any guesses, and none of us should. Okay, he's doing the right things. He's going to see the neurologist. There's going to be a massive rehab. There's going to be a massive discussion with the people that should be having this discussion, and then we'll see. I'll say this, because I've been doing this now for the better part of 2 decades, and I've had a chance to speak to players and agents and all sorts of stuff. These guys want football. They want to play football. They want to be in football. It's why some of these guys have to be ripped off the field. And the second they're ripped off the field, they want a podcast or a network or something that they can just geek out and continue to talk and be inside of this circle. It's not everybody, right? There's plenty of players and athletes and people in all careers that get burned out and never want to come back to this significant thing. We've seen that too. But man, you already know, based on past evidence, multiple exhibits, right, that Tua loves this shit. He loves it. And it's why he's trying to rush back. It's not for money. He's got that now. He loves this game. So my objective take is that he doesn't give a rat's behind about any of the numbers that I've posted or that you're talking about. And he doesn't give a rat's behind about what you think he should do with his career. He's going to listen, and he's going to do everything he can to play football. That's my objective take, because he's just one of those guys where this is life. And he's trying to extend this part of his life as much as possible, understanding the health, the safety, and the financial side of it, for sure. I'm just going to reference it one more time so that it's out there on record in this capacity, on this medium. But this is how it goes. All right. He's got a $167 million guarantee. That number has been thrown out there quite a bit now. I'm sure that when the Miami Dolphins signed this contract, they chunked a ton of that with an insurance policy for them. I'm positive of it. And I don't need, the people that deep dive this stuff from a legal standpoint to tell me that. I'm positive that based on what we know in the past and saw in the past, and the Dolphins had to go through in the past with him, that there's an insurance policy. So you'll hear that. You'll continue to hear that. It has no impact on their cap stuff at all. Okay. And by the way, talking cap with a player that has a head injury could not be grosser, but I have to do it. I'm sorry. 167 and change guaranteed for practical purposes. All right. That runs through 2027. That's the injury guarantee right now. Okay. So if he is medically forced to walk away, he's getting all of that. Unless he and the two sides work out some sort of settlement agreement, which does happen. Every single March, something becomes a full guarantee. which means it's guaranteed for cap or skill or injury. Right now, it's all injury. All right. So by next March, another $54 million is going to lock in here, all of 2026. That'll be his no matter what happens. The finicky part, and it was part 2 of my little thread that I threw out here. The finicky part with Tua is that because of the rolling guarantees like this, from a full guarantee standpoint, there's a world, especially now after Russell Wilson, right? There's a world where the Dolphins can, if they feel so inclined, move on from Tua, outright release him after this season, as long as he can pass a physical. And that's easier said than done, I think, right now. And pay him $50 million, all of his 2025 salary. But 2026 would not have been fully guaranteed. And just a portion of that 167 would be fully guaranteed. So it'd be 43 this year and 50 next year. That's 93 out of the 167. That's about 55% of his guaranteed money would be paid to him, but then nothing more. That's Tua's healthy enough to pass a physical. He wants to continue playing football, but the Dolphins decide moving forward is no longer in their best interest. That's the scenario that really gets finicky, right? That really gets weird. I don't think we're even close to that. But this is a team that needs a quarterback, right? There's no question about it. They have running backs, well-paid wide receivers, a well-paid offensive line, a well-paid secondary, all right? They have contracts galore. So they're going to have to do something, especially if this is going to be a long-term, rehabilitation for Tua, which I think we all can assume it's probably going to be based on his history and just how careful the league and teams and players and everybody has to be with this stuff now. So there's going to be some sort of reaction to this from a roster construction standpoint. They're not going to roll with Skylar Thompson for 2 years. So I just wanted out there that if he can't play anymore because of this medical stuff, the 167 is his. That's in there. And the Dolphins, from an insurance standpoint, can help themselves cash-wise, but that's all going to hit the cap. All right? And unless a settlement comes into play. If not, then it becomes, well, what do we do with our roster? What do we do with this position? Because it's risky bringing him back. The contract is kind of airtight for him year to year. So do we just kind of bite the bullet, pay him $50 million to go away, and take on right around $84 million of dead cap over 2 seasons? And if you think that sounds bonkers, Russell Wilson's dead cap was $85 million in Denver. It was $39 million cash, $85 million of total dead cap from 2024 to 2025. So this would be $50 million cash, $84 million dead cap, 2025 to 2026. It's difficult because the Dolphins have a loaded financial roster where Denver didn't. Denver did a lot of stripping down sort of to prepare themselves for this Russell Wilson cap hit. Again, I hate this conversation. This is a great guy, a great athlete, and a player who wants to continue playing football. There's no question in my mind. But these are the numbers. The 167 is medically guaranteed. Another $54 million will lock in next March if he's still on the roster in some capacity. But if he's healthy enough to pass a physical next March, the conversation of a release is probably going to come up because, again, this is football, and that's the position that wins football games. And unfortunately, if he can't do it, or if the Dolphins are worried that he won't be able to do it at a high level, really for the next 2 to 3 seasons within this current window that they have built, then it's one of two things. You start gutting the roster that you've just extended and paid and signed, or you replace the quarterback. And that's just reality. I mean, that's just what this team's going to have to do to either restart for another contention window or remain in the one they're in right now. Okay, Plenty of work posted on Spotrac.com. More pieces by Keith Smith as the NBA season starts to come into focus. He's got a big one up about the Boston Celtics and how much money they're going to be paying out this next and for years to come with all of their core extensions, and plenty of other things to read as well, including a full breakdown of Dak Prescott's historic contract extension with the Dallas Cowboys. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spotrac Podcast.